Cool. All right, so I'd like to start off, each of these first two lectures of physical geography of North America and human geography of North America with these maps that I spent a lot of time on, trying to kind of create this main theme. So last time we talked about how we had the map, the natural terrain map of North America. We could see the mountain ranges, the browns, the greens, and all of that. Now, of course, we talk about the more recent phenomenon that's happened on top of all of those various physical processes we talked about last time, and that's human beings. And we're going to focus more on the human beings that have been here rather recently. Recently being the last 200 to 300 years. So if you're one of those die-hard people that are like, wait a minute, you're not talking about the first Americans, you're not talking about the original North Americans, i.e. the Native Americans or the indigenous groups, I apologize. I apologize that I won't be spending a lot of time on them because I don't see much today reflection of that group here in North America. Now in parts there are, we're going to talk about when we get to parts of Canada, no doubt when we get to the interior United States, we're going to talk a little bit about them in your own little introductions to regions, but for the most part we're going to focus in on humans rather recently. And if you've taken my human geography course, some of these initial concepts, I apologize, they're going to be a bit redundant things we've already talked about. But because since not everyone took G110 online or on campus, I got to come back and make sure we're all on the same page. And so those of you who've already taken my class, now's your chance to showcase. What's a developed country? A stage 4 country. And so he's talking in our own code. So we're talking code right now. He just says developed countries are stage 4 countries. What is a stage 4 country? What's some key characteristics of one? Of a stage 4. What makes it a stage 4?
Low birth rate.
Low birth rate. So not a lot of babies being born.
The type of product they're producing. Like as opposed to textile, it's more like leaning towards technology.
Oh, so now we're talking about things that are even people. Now we're talking about things that are economic or, you could say almost wealth attributed. So here we talked about low birth rates is a characteristic of a developed country. What'd you say again?
They're what they produce as a country.
So what they produce, so that's an indicator of the key economic sectors, but also we can relate that to the digital divide. What else is a characteristic of a developed country?
Medical revolution.
So medical revolution. So what does that mean?
They've just developed medicine that can provide low death rates and keep it balanced with the birth rates.
So then now we've got low birth rates, but also low death rates. And we can explain this as far as medical technology. So another way to say it is in developed countries, you don't die of malaria. In developed countries, you don't die of, too often of what we refer to as infectious diseases. Instead, you're dying because of what we call degenerative diseases. We're dying because of heart failure. We're dying because of cancer. We're dying because we're just so stinking old. And so how we die is another characteristic of a developed country. Developing countries, the antithesis to this, the other side to the developed coin, we find more infectious diseases as far as how people die. Low birth rates, low death rates. What else could we say?
Higher monetary standard of living. You're going to have higher per capita, higher GDP.
Oh, higher GDP per capita. So higher GDP per capita, maybe I wonder if we could possibly relate that to life expectancy. I think we will here shortly. So GDP, economic wealth. And so developed countries have higher economic wealth, or we could say per person have higher economic wealth. Because you could say countries like Saudi Arabia, well they're developed because they got huge GDP, GDP per capita. Most of that wealth is the few in Saudi Arabia who control things. So there, it matters as far as per capita, which is on average the average person in a given country. Anything else you want to say?
More jobs in the service industry instead
More
of production.
Oh my gosh, my G110 people are just on fire. So service industry, the types of jobs. So the simple way to do this is, if you haven't taken my G110 course, at first what was perceived to be the biggest pain in the ass assignment actually becomes probably the most insightful one, and that's where your stuff comes from. And so if you look at where your stuff comes from, for the most part, it doesn't come from the United States. Why? Because we can't get away with paying 50 cents for someone to work on some, to make a textile for a day. So that's very much a reflection of developed countries. Is we're not making simple things, we're making very high-tech things, but for the most part we are a service sector. Service sector, you're not producing anything, instead you're providing your knowledge. So raise your hand if you want to be a farmer. Raise your hand if you want to be a miner, a coal miner, like a miner with an E. No, those days are over for the most part, right? What was I talking about again? Miners, yeah. No miners in the house. Who wants to work on an assembly line? Who wants to make carburetors for Ford? No one. Overwhelmingly, if you go to IUPUI, you're going to work in the service sector. You're providing a skill. Teachers, consultants, travel agents, event managers. You're providing a service. You're not producing anything. And so that's another characteristic of developed country is the types of jobs you have there. More service sector, more providing knowledge. All right, that's a quick 411 on what a developed country is. And so now that we've kind of introduced to you our code words, here's what we call our good friend the demographic transition model. The idea here is that over time, countries, states, whatever, they work and transition through this system here, through this model, going from stage 1 to stage 2 to stage 3 to stage 4. And of course, as Darius mentioned, stage 4 countries are what we refer to as developed countries. So let's explain what we're looking at here. The red line illustrates birth rate. The blue line illustrates death rate. Overall population is illustrated here by the mustardy color line there. So what we got going on here is in stage 1. Stage 1, high birth rates, high death rates. A whole lot of people being born, a whole lot of people dying. That's not going to cause population to grow. Makes sense. There's no way it can grow. If a lot of people being born, a lot of people are dying, they're essentially offsetting each other. And so we have very low growth. There are no places in the world, absolutely no places in the world that are stage 1. We've all, as human beings, we've transitioned through this phase. Now we enter the next phase. The next stage, and that's stage 2. Here in stage 2, notice what happens to growth. The population skyrockets. And so the fastest growing countries in the world, they aren't United Kingdom. They aren't United States. They aren't Australia. They are oftentimes very poor countries. But why are they growing? Birth rates are still high, but the people are living longer. Death rates are going down. And so essentially what's happening here is people are living longer. Medical advancements, the spread of medical knowledge is key to driving that. And so in stage 2, those are going to be what we refer to as developing countries. Things start to transition. So the idea here is over time, death rates go down, but eventually birth rates go down too. Because who wants to have 15 kids? No one does anymore. Because it's, so many things have changed. But especially with more people moving to urban areas, it's not cool to have 15 kids because you got to put those 15 kids through school. If you're out in a rural area, those are 15 hands out in the field. That's a good thing. But more people move to urban areas, more people move to cities, there becomes less of a desire for women to have, for families to have a large number of kids. Eventually, we get what we have today, very low growth. And so our developed countries have very low population growth. We're not going to see our fastest growing countries in the world being called developed. There's only 1 or 2 exceptions I can think of, and that one exception is the US of A. We are growing quite considerably. Why are we growing quite considerably? Anyone have any idea? Immigration, by far. And so how do we keep on growing? Even though our women, if I ask how many women, or how many of you want to have 4 kids, ladies? 3, 2, 1, 0. And so you can see number one answer was 2. And so wait a minute, that's that's replacement. You know, because it takes two to make two. I'm not going to go into that, but you know, two replacing two. So it means we wouldn't grow. So how can we be growing? How are we continue to grow? How are we up to almost 375 million immigration overwhelmingly? And that's something that distinguishes North America from the rest of the Western Hemisphere. And so no places today are these stage 1 or only stage 2. We refer to developing being, like I said, stage 2 and stage 3. Still growth, even though it's decreasing growth, that's still fast growth. It's just saying it's not as high as it was in the previous stage. And eventually we got our developed country status. Now we're not going to get into this in this course, but there are some that say we are moving towards stage 5. The idea that countries are actually losing population. See Italy. Italy right now is losing population, it's losing people. And so it has actually a declining rate, declining growth. Same with Russia. Anyway, all right, this is another map. Let's just get through that one. All right, so that was basically saying that the fastest growing countries, the fastest growing areas are what we refer to as developing, and the slower growing ones we refer to as developed. Another key characteristic of developed countries, in particular North America, or good for North America, is the fact that these developed countries, it makes sense. They've got jobs available. And so if they've got jobs, they've got a higher amount of wealth, they create jobs, they're going to, guess what, attract people. And so if your life sucks in, let's say, one of these orange or green countries, you're going to want to move to where life doesn't suck as much, where there's actually job opportunities. And so we can see that in those developed countries, like the United States and Canada, we attract migrants. So we attract migrants, especially when we compare it to our southern neighbor, Mexico, and much of the Caribbean, who are continuing to lose population. And a lot of those people that they're losing, they're best and they're brightest and they're young people. And so down the road, we'll come back maybe and talk about Mexico, if we want to talk about it, and talk about some demographic issues they have going forward, when the best and the brightest are leaving to come to the United States and stay here. Another way to showcase the whole developed country is in this map here. And this map shows internet usage. And so in my G110 class, I really try to emphasize the digital divide. Those who have access to technology and those who don't. And of course, that gap is widening as time goes on, as technology becomes even more common. I saw this goofy thing in which there's like a watch now that you can do with your smartphone. Goofy as hell, but whatever. And so where we find that here in our high-tech countries that are on the positive side of the digital divide. But nonetheless, you can see it doesn't matter what time of day. Pretty much our developed countries, there's a high internet usage going on, and so that's acquisition of knowledge. Knowledge is power, as we've learned. Further, there's our border separating Canada and the United States, and I think it's another good way to showcase the fact that that line doesn't do a good job of separating them, and so that's why I think our regions, our perception of North America in its different regions, instead of dividing up Canada in the United States separately, talk about them separately, I think there's definitely some overlap and some parallels, and I think this helps to showcase that. And so I would argue our regions do a better job of explaining North America than just strictly by looking at U.S. and Canada, which is a theme that we'll push on throughout the semester. Another thing that wasn't mentioned but kind of related to fertility and birth rates is the role of women. And so another characteristic of developed countries, i.e. Canada and United States, is the fact that the view of women is much higher in these societies, which then helps explain birth rates and fertility rates. And so here, in certain places, maybe some of our red places we see in this map, the women have very little say in how many kids they're going to have. Essentially, they're viewed as a baby maker. And so there's really not major jobs. They're not going off and starting a career. They're not going to get that college diploma. Instead, they're 16, 17, 18 producing babies. Whereas here in the United States, that's a completely different deal. So the role of women, no doubt, is a characteristic of the United States and Canada that helps distinguish us from the rest of the world. So we can see these developed countries at a higher level, or whatever this is, the Mothers Index, the conditions for mothers. And so women, particularly in the United States, would rather start a career, rather go to college than do the whole baby making thing. And we can see that at IUPUI. I mean, look at the numbers of female students. It's just, maybe it's just my classes, but it's like 80%, it seems like, females to males. I think it showcases that's not something that's just here at IUPUI. It's fairly across the board. Of course, things change at a sciencey school like Purdue, but for the most part, we see going to college, which speaks to the gender equality in the United States compared to other countries where women don't have those luxuries. All right, another way to describe this, I kind of picked a potpourri of countries. And so we've got Canada and the United States squeezed in here. Of course, our good friend Mexico. And so these are another ways. Maybe if you didn't believe my images here, here's maybe for those data wonks that want to see actual data to showcase what I mean by developed. And so comparing to Afghanistan, we all, I think, should know that Afghanistan, not a developed country at all. We could throw in maybe India to a certain extent. But then Mexico, we can see the total fertility rates. Where are they the lowest? They're lower in Canada, Sweden, our developed countries. They get higher when we get to our less developed countries. LE is life expectancy. So I like to think of this, how many more years on average you have left to live? Tick tock, tick tock. Not how many on average years you're going to live, it's how many you've got left. That window's closing, it's sad but true. But anyway, so in Afghanistan, the average person lives to 50. Whereas in our developed countries, i.e. Canada, Sweden, United States, it's a higher number. And so life expectancy plays a key role. Further, net migration, if it's a positive number, that means you have more people coming in. If it's a negative number, it means that you have more people leaving. Where do we see our negative numbers? In our developing countries, i.e. Mexico and Afghanistan. And so if you don't know what developed and developing is, I hope now you know. All right. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through a litany of internet sites. So this is kind of with our future educators in mind. So our future educators in mind, here's some great resources to use, resources that I just kind of stumbled upon rather recently. The first one being what they call Gapminder World. And just Google Gapminder World, and this is what you'll see. So Gapminder World, you can kind of play with all these various things. And so if you don't know how to read a line graph or a graph, I'll try to quickly explain to you here. And so what do we got going on down here? We've got income per person, GDP per capita. And so higher GDP per capita to our right, lower GDP per capita to our left. Essentially wealth. Higher wealth, lower wealth. Over here on the left-hand side, we've got life expectancy. And so the idea here is places that are lower income typically also have lower life expectancy. What this also allows us to do is pick individual countries, compare them to other regions based on color, blue being sub-Saharan Africa, yellow being the Western Hemisphere, and so forth. We can see that up there. But also we can compare population size. So the size of these circles, we got a whole lot going on here. The size of the circles relate to population. And so the bigger the circle, the bigger the population. So who do you think that is? The big old sucker right there.
India.
China or India, one of the two, obviously. So it's one of the two. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go through time. I went ahead and I highlighted Canada and United States, and let's see if we can go ahead and find anything happening here. So we play it, and so what we're transitioning through time. And so the world's transitioning, another way to maybe visualize the demographic transition model, but there's Canada, and then there's the United States. You can see how the United States growing quite quickly during the mid-1900s. So if I kind of stop it there, you can see China, India, as far as wealth, are way behind at this time, 1980, compared to Canada, United States, and the other developed countries that we would think of as Europe. Now let's see what happens here more recently. See if they kind of quickly jump over. Come on now. Oh, it's already finished, isn't it? It was so quick I didn't even see it. But nonetheless, a good resource to use. That might have been a failed attempt, but whatever. Future teachers, you'll fail a lot yourselves. Okay. Now let's look at population pyramids. Population pyramids, and are great ways to get a kind of a quick shot of what's happening as far as the structure of a population. And so once again, the reason why I'm doing this is kind of starting at a bigger scale, US and Canada, and then we're going to zoom in throughout the course of the semester and look at specific regions. But I'm going to compare the world to the United States, Canada, and Western Europe. Western Europe, the reason why I pick Western Europe is I feel like it's a good proxy for what we would refer to as a group of developed countries. So if we're going to compare developed countries, the argument that the United States and Canada are very much characteristic of one. All right, population pyramid of the world. All right, let's try to figure out what's going on here. Over here, males, over there, females. And so what this down here is showing is percentage of the population. And so this quick 411, so we've got different age groups. And so what age group, the average world citizen, or sorry, I should say the age group that has the most number of world citizens is which group?
Babies and 20 to 24.
So it looks like right here, babies. And so the average earthling, the average earthling is fairly young. We could say, we can see when it looks like a Hershey kiss, when it looks like a triangle, it's very much indicative of a young population. That makes sense. Look all the young people we have, inferior old people. Now that's the world snapshot. And so the average world citizen is young. But if we take a look at our good friend the United States and Canada, we can see now that youth, that all that shrinks. And so we can see a much different structure. So the average US American, I shouldn't say, stop saying average. The age group that has the highest number, the highest percentage of US Americans is 45 to 49. 45 to 49, this age group here. You could almost say the people in their 40s, let's say. This is 2010. What other group? You guys, you people. And so, quick 411, what's going on here? You come back from the war. You've been gone for 4 or 5 years. You're a man, been gone for 4 or 5 years, you come back. You come back. Come back. And you want to start a family. Okay, and so you want to start a family, and that boom happened right there. And so that's the baby boom. We all know about that one. This group right here, the millennials, what are you guys? The echo boom. You're just the baby boom's kids. That's all that is. And so there's kind of this lull here in the middle. And that lull is people like me, people in their 30s. And so we just have older people above us, the baby boom generation, and younger people, the millennial generation. So that's our population structure here in the United States. Not too dissimilar from Canada. Canada, one thing about Canada is it has a little bit lower of an in-migration as far as number of immigrants. So United States, we have a larger percentage of immigration. If you're an immigrant, you're not going to be 12 years old. Why? How are you going to move anywhere? How are you going to get on a plane when you're 12 and have no money? How are you going to go across and go through countries when you're 12? Of course not. What about when you're 65? No, you're about ready to die. The last thing you want to do is go move somewhere else and try to start another life, new job somewhere else. And so if you're an immigrant, more often than not, you're rather young. You're still producing babies. You're still in your 20s, your 30s. And so when we think about United States, that's the group that's coming in here to kind of fill the gap from the baby boomers having not as many kids as their parents had. So while your grandparents and your parents might be like, well, grandpa and grandma, mom and dad had 4 to 6 siblings, now more likely that you to have 2 to 3 siblings max, maybe even 0 like me. Further, Canada, like I said, and then Western Europe, and we can kind of see how Western Europe is very much an aging population. And so, going forward in developed countries like the United States and Canada, it's not so much a problem, or the key problem is all those old people. All these aging people. Not really a problem that's found in other places of the world. All right, we're zooming in and getting further detail and getting closer to the US of A. That's from a site called populationpyramid.net, a brand new site that's taking over in K through 12 geography teacher world. All right, moving right along. I think we're on to migration, I believe. We got any cute maps to show? Yeah, there's a cute map. So where we got people coming from. So as far as in the United States and Canada, I hope I just tried to emphasize the fact that it's growing due to immigration. Well, where are they coming from? So we've got, for the most part, we've got some similarities, but some key differences. So both the United States and Canada have an influx of Asian migrants. There's no doubt that in both Canada and the United States, you can see a strong presence of an increasing Asian population that's more than just Chinese, Indian, and kind of what we would typically think of. It's a lot of Vietnamese and Koreans, Japanese. It's a potpourri of Asians. One of the things, though, to think about what distinguishes Canada from the United States is Canada does not get a large amount of Latin American migrants. So you do not see a lot of Latin American migrants in Canada. Overwhelmingly, a good chunk of their in-migrants are going to be Asian. So we're going to be able to see this, I think, on a slide that follows. And so one way we can distinguish the United States and Canada, a simple multiple choice question, is the fact that Latin American are more common in the United States. And that makes sense. They're right there. They're right. It's right there. It shares a border with the United States. Of course, does not share a border with Canada. And so let's zoom in and look at migration. What's this site called? For those future educators out there, People Moving. PeopleMoving.in. I don't know what the .in is, but People Mover. People moving. Whatever. And so world population, 6.8 billion. I saw somewhere, this is just a stupid statistic that I know stuck in my head. So if let me do this right now. A US baby just was born. 7 more seconds, another one will be born. In Canada, it's a minute, 12 seconds. So every minute, 12 seconds, a baby's born. In the United States, it's every 7 seconds. So that's, that's stupid. Who cares? Anyway, so migrants to the world. That's, K through 12 geography teachers would love that stat, but that doesn't really matter. So top migrant destination. So we continue to be the world's number one destination for immigrants. But look who's number 5. Canada. So North America, particularly the 2 countries we're really going to focus in on, are heavily influenced by in-migration. And this once again makes sense. These are going to be our developed countries in which they've got jobs going on. Russia, I don't know what's going on there. That just makes sense. But anyway, let's zoom in and let's figure out what's going on in Canada. So what we can do here is we can then look at so we can click on right now, for instance, Australia, and it shows the places in which Australians are migrating to. But then if we go to the other side, we can click on a country and see where they're coming from. And so we click on Canada, and then there's this data here. So Canada, where are most Canadian residents migrants coming from? A good chunk of them are from the United Kingdom. So British, Irish, Northern Irish, Scottish. So that's where we're getting a large number of migrants coming into Canada, is from the United Kingdom. Also a good amount from China, India, Philippines, the same casting characters that we're going to find with the United States. But once again, what's absent from here is the lack of Latin American countries. We don't see any. But we also see Hong Kong. So Ecotopia. I hope you talk about the Hong Kong population there in Vancouver, which is very prevalent. If you go to Vancouver, a huge number of Hong Kong migrants that have migrated over time. It's not like a recent thing. It's been a long migration. But nonetheless, we can, I think, see a pattern over here where it's a lot of Asian countries, but no Latin American countries. We go ahead and go on down, scroll on down to our good friend the United States. The same characters. China, Philippines, India, Vietnam. But now we see El Salvador popping up there. Cuba popping up there. Puerto Rico, which is kind of a state, kind of not. But then, of course, number 1, Mexico, overwhelmingly. The number one migrant corridor in which migrants cross through overwhelmingly is our southern border. If you don't know that, now you know. Illegal or legal. So that's even saying if we don't even count illegal immigration, still number one. But like I said, why am I showing this? Why am I, I'm emphasizing is the fact that, kind of where our typical migrants are coming from and differentiating from Canada. And so that, I can probably make that as a PowerPoint and send that to you. If you all just send me a message to remind me, of course I'll make it white, not black. Anything else we're going to pick apart from that? Canada, as far as its percent, has its overall percentage are migrants, 21% compared to 13%. Anything else we can chew out of that? Anything? No?
People are leaving China like it's on fire. Because of all the countries that you pulled up, China's always been in the top 5.
Yeah, the problem with this is this doing numbers. And so China's already so big to begin with. It's got 1 billion people. So if it loses, let's say, a tenth of a percent of a population, that's a huge tenth of a percent in China and India compared to El Salvador. And so it's a numbers thing. Why, if I was doing percentages, it'd probably be a little bit more reflective. What's going on in China? There's a lot of different things going on. It's been more recently, it's been the last 20, 30 years. You've seen the Chinese migration. We think about Vietnamese and Koreans. It was more in the 70s where we saw that migration stream. Now it's becoming more Chinese and Indian. A lot of that is for education purposes. A lot of it is for jobs. But in some respects it is cultural, no doubt about it. I'm not going to go into that one though. All right. Let's talk about the United States and talk about internal migration. So we're kind of zooming in. So we're zooming in now to focus in on migration within the United States. With the whole idea is this is going to help build when you are doing your presentations, and later on we're going to visit each of these different individual regions. So where is population growing internally in the United States? Overwhelmingly in the South and the West. And so where is population growing? It's growing in Florida. It's growing in the Carolinas. It's growing in Texas. It's growing in California. It's growing in Colorado. And so just generally we refer to as the South and the West. And so this is a migration that's, of course, increasing. These are numbers that are increasing because of in-migration. But within the country, these numbers are also increasing because of migrants moving from one part of our country to another part. Where places not growing as fast or even declining, the Midwest and the Northeast, so New England people, the Foundry, a good chunk of the breadbasket. Those are all places that are losing population. Places that are gaining population. Mex-America, Dixie, Ecotopia. Those are places that are growing population. The empty core, the middle, that's just kind of a hodgepodge. Depends on where you are. And depends on where you are. And I'll explain a little bit deeper here when I push the next button. Which I'll push it now. There we go. All right, so here is at the state level. And so quick 411 here. If your state's dark blue, that means in the last 10 years you grew. If you're orange, you actually even declined. And if you're a pasty blue, you barely even increased. So let's just look at the places that really have grown. The places that really have grown are Carolinas, Georgia, Florida, Texas, and then Nevada. Now this is a deal where if we did this data more recently, it wouldn't be as dark blue probably. But nonetheless, we can see this west and this southern phenomenon. And in other classes I talk about this. We've got what we think of as the Rust Belt and the Sun Belt. And so the Rust Belt. Rust Belt is Ohio, Pennsylvania, New York, Michigan, Indiana. These are places that have a long legacy of making things, and that legacy is slowly, or actually pretty quickly moving away. And so these are places that have a declining number of jobs, and so guess what? A declining number of people. Jobs and people, jobs, when we think about growth and decline, jobs and people are completely tied together. Of course, people are going to follow jobs. Where we see an increase, essentially below this line here, which is roughly what I'm going to call the Sun Belt. In particular, these areas here that I've already mentioned. So Mex-America, Ecotopia, Florida, and much of Dixie. Now, not everywhere in Dixie, and that's why we're going to have a regional specific discussion, is that when you get to Dixie, you group Z people, you are going to, I hope, differentiate between places that are growing and places that are not growing here in Dixie. Why is it that places right through here are actually declining? So I hope you touch on that. But then there's this one area here that's kind of above this arbitrary dash line I put right through the middle of this map, and that's the Rocky Mountains. So more recently, the Rocky Mountains have been attracting people, and a lot of this is for amenities. I think we all probably know that one, it's usually a trust fund hippie. Trust fund hippies are the kids that are like from Carmel probably, that have everything in life been handed to them. So they wake up every day with a silver spoon in their mouth. And so they all, a lot of them go to like Boulder, UC Boulder, University of Colorado Boulder, or maybe Pepperdine, or all these schools. Well, they're going there because they want to go to the amenities, the Rocky Mountain amenities. Now, this is something that's a little farther for us in the Midwest, but West Coasters, a lot more of them are migrating to the Rocky Mountains because of the amenities that are found there, which is maybe something in the empty corner you can touch on. The growth of jobs and industries in the Rocky Mountains, but even more recently the Dakotas. And a lot of this, once again, people follow jobs. And then over time, jobs then also follow people. And so you kind of have that related effect. Now let's go up to Canada. Let's go up to Canada here real quick and let's kind of try to figure out what's going on there. So why did I have you memorize all the provinces of Canada? So I can ask this question right here. Where in Canada do we see, what province do we see, what provinces do we see population growth? Purple. Where are we purple at?
Alberta.
Alberta, we know our provinces. Great, Alberta. And so Alberta, that's not really one of the sexy ones. British Columbia, Ontario, Quebec. Alberta is kind of this one kind of stuck out in the middle of nowhere. So what's going on there? A lot of the same things I mentioned in the previous slide regarding the United States. So right through here is the Rocky Mountains. And so there's a city called Calgary, which is becoming more popular. Banff, B-A-N-F-F, is a big ski resort, which is attracting a lot of people. So a lot of people are moving here for the amenities. But also what's found here? A lot of jobs, a lot of resources, a lot of mining, a lot of ag happening here. So this is an area that has a diverse array of jobs, and it's continuing to attract people. So in Canada, we've got not so much a south and west situation going on like we had in the United States, but instead kind of this attraction to the interior, attraction to Alberta, kind of that Rocky Mountains growth that I already mentioned. Where else might we see population growth in Canada?
Nova Scotia?
That's actually, you thinking that's Nova Scotia?
Yeah, is that
Yeah, it's a bad map. It's Canadians, they need to come take care of more of our geography courses down here to learn how to make maps. But anyway, so this is essentially this area here zoomed in. And so that makes it confusing. I thought the same thing. I'm like, what the hell is that? Is that Alaska? That's essentially a zoomed in version of that. So with that being said, what is this? Or that?
What did I say before, Nova Scotia?
Yeah, it ain't Nova Scotia.
It's New Brunswick there.
Ontario.
Ontario. That's where Toronto is. Toronto. And so Toronto, one of the fastest growing cities in North America. It's a very international city. Anybody been to Toronto? Very international city. So there, you're going to see all kinds of groups. So that's, we think about the graph I showed of Canadian migrants. A diverse array. That diverse array, where they go in, oftentimes Ontario. Very diverse there. And so Ontario, Alberta are areas of growth. Where are areas of decline? Saskatchewan. And so you can pretty much say are rural places, particularly the rural interior. These are more highland areas, more Rocky Mountain rural areas. These are kind of our flat Great Plains-ish area. Keep in mind the Great Plains goes well up into Canada here. So pretty much rural areas, but for the most part, Canada is very sparsely populated when you get anywhere up here. So you get pretty much up here, there's hardly anybody lives there. Most of the population lives very close to the U.S. border. Now what we're going to do is take a quick look at the Census dot map. So this is one of the things that came out, I think last year. Another great resource for future educators to use. census dot map. And so what this is if you zoom in all the way, every single human being who took the census in either the United States, and they actually include now Canada into this map using Canadian data, every single person is represented as a dot. You're represented on here. You're a dot. Every single person. So if I zoom in, I can see you. You'll be this little black dot, but I'll see you. And so what we can see here is we can see particular patterns. Of course, our urban areas pop up. Further, some of the things we note regarding this is the early history of the United States. Of course, we know that it started off on the eastern coast and it's since worked its way across. But now that we know a little bit about physical geography, we can also see a lot of physical geography influences on this dot map of people. For example, question mark, where we see physical geography, you can kind of see the mountains right through here. You can kind of see how there's a fewer amount of people right through here. So you can actually see the apple. Keep in mind, they didn't try to design borders on this map. There's no borders made. All it is dots. But you can see waterways too. You can see our lakes, and you can see how people like to cluster along lakes, along major water bodies, which is very much characteristic of our early history. How do we transport things? Via water, overwhelmingly. And so much of the origin, and it's even in Canada, much of the origin of the country started on the East Coast, especially along waterways, and then over time expanded westward. What helped to expand westward? The railroads. And so the railroads were very critical for expanding and opening up the interior. How can we relate to this personally? Indianapolis is one of the largest cities not on a navigable waterway. And so right there, that probably tells you that Indianapolis's growth was after the railroads were constructed. It wouldn't have existed. I mean, the White River is just a trickle. And how are you going to move a ship up White River? Obviously you can't. And so what was key for Indianapolis's growth? The railroad. Same for Atlanta. Same for a lot of these interior cities that aren't on a rail line. And so when we look at a census dot map for your particular regions, why I'm talking about this and inserting this is, if you're going to be maybe talking about New England people, your next time, right, or your almost next time, screenshot this. Zoom in, screenshot it, and use this as a slide. Use this as maybe one of your Pechacucha slides, or maybe a couple of them. And so you can maybe analyze the cluster here, the cluster, or something like that. And so I'm giving you resources that I definitely want to encourage you to use on your GERS. Anything else we want to tease out of this? St. Lawrence, you can kind of see the St. Lawrence through there. Anything? Let's see, we'll go ahead and put the labels on. Why no people right through here?
The airfield? Or what?
Okay, why no people right there?
Sorry,
The airfield. Why no people right here? Nothing's that funny. So from the Wide River, there's a dump there.
So our IPOs.
IPL might be there. That's where the animal incinerator is. It's where the recycle thing is. It's a landfill. It's a mine. It's all kinds of things where there's not going to be people living. But this is a cool map. You can zoom in, and I mean, literally, you can see yourself if you zoom in close enough. So that's the dot map. All right, I thought I'd go longer. That's all I had planned for it.